You know what? Let's start this. Let's run the trailer. Run the trailer, safety man.
We'll run the trailer.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am Mr.MKL. I hope y'all are doing well today. Welcome to the first ever Indie FGC Developer Roundtable. I'm joined here with my good friend, Safety Man, on the dials.
Yo, what's up,
Say
Mike?
hi. How's
What's
it
up,
going?
Mike?
Thank you. Thank you for joining me tonight for all this. We've been working hard in the background putting this together, folks.
Working, I've been
of course,
scrambling, man. Holy crap.
yeah, right? I know.
You know how everything goes, like, you have everything in place, and then just before you hit the live button, everything breaks. It's like, oh my god, I gotta fix this. That's just what happened. It's okay. I'm caffeinated. I'm all good. I got my Tim Hortons, so we're ready to go.
There you go.
with
That's
this
right.
Indie FGC
coming to you,
Developer
folks,
Roundtable.
all the way from Canada, of course, and I mean around the world. Yes, the Indie Fighting Game Developer Roundtable. For you though, for those who don't know, I was inspired not too long ago by the Japanese fighting game publisher roundtable, which has taken place on a few occasions. So yeah, this is an event that gathers some of the some big players from the development scene and publishing scene in Japanese fighting games, gathers them together, talk about the state of affairs. And I'm like, you know what? Like, fighting games are so much more than just those major titles. Fighting games are so much more than your Street Fighters and your KOFs and your Mortal Kombats.
Fighting games are something so great.
Right? They're fantastic, and they're wild, and they're varied, and I felt we needed to hear some different voices. So I have actually gone out and I have reached out to a bunch of fantastic indie game developers and decided to gather them together around a round table so that no one gets their eyes poked out on the corners, in order to talk about the state of the industry and see what our thoughts on fighting games and indie game development. So I am pleased to announce, I think we should go around the table here and do some introductions.
Well, I think we should do you first.
Oh, we should do.
Because,
Me. This
we
is
gotta
not
talk about
me.
you. Yeah. Here we go.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Mr.MKL, of course. You might know me from my Niche Fighter Monday streams. You might know me from some of my YouTube stuff. I am a tournament organizer as well. I've been working with Toronto Top Tiers on all of the Fantasy Strike and Stun City events, and now I host my own indie fighting game events as well. So I am here today as your moderator, of course, and kind of ringmaster. And yeah, happy to be here. And I am very happy to introduce our four lovely panelists. Our producer. Are we going to start with our producer?
Yeah. So when I was going through this, I was like, hey, I'm making all these panels for these for the panelists. I'm like, wait a minute, we need our. I need one too. I can't go along. I can't go without having that. So I'm Safety Man. I am with Toronto Top Tiers. We are a group that runs tournaments in the city of Toronto. I am one of the TOs for that group, and my project right now is Cyber Stun City, which is a online weekly series. We have a bunch of games on Tekken, Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, and King of Fighters, and it's all around. You can check us out on Toronto Top Tiers. That's our main social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and YouTube. I'm trying not to do the ad roll. I'm really trying not to do my ad roll. I'm so used to saying it, but yeah. Anyways, let's go back to this scene. And Mike, you're going to introduce our panelists one by one. So when you say the panelist name, I'll put their mugshot on screen.
Well, let's set these folks up here. Let's start off with none other than Andrea D.
Thanks.
How are you doing?
So I am Andrea Demetrio. Someone calls me also Andrea Jens Demetrio. I'm the developer of Schwarzer Blitz and Motion Sickness, so that crazy guy who made this game where with impossible inputs just for fun after a beer. I'm also a writer for Super Combo, the website which writes about fighting game news. And honestly, I'm pretty excited to be here. By me, it's at 10:30 p.m. because I'm live from Germany. So it was a bit of a logistic, interesting, difficult as a logistic. But I'm honestly very excited to be here this evening and talk to you all.
Well, we're happy to have you. Yes, you mentioned that you're the developer of Schwarzerblitz and Motion Sickness. As we go through you, I want to ask you folks, like, what was your big inspiration for the games that you have made?
So for Schwarzer Blitz, it was basically something I was planning to, okay, not planning, but wanting to do since I was like 9 years old when I first played Tekken 2 at my local arcade. And I think it shows because some of the character designs are actually from that period. So I basically Schwarzer Blitz is a combination of my memories of Tekken 2 and the best gameplay ideas I could get from Soul Calibur later, because I was a nut for Soul Calibur. 8-way run is the superior movement option for 3D fighting games. And I was just, let's say, sad that there was nothing on PC in 2015, 2016. The only game that I could actually play on PC without consoles was, I think, PoA 5. The only 3D fighting game with 3D movement, etc. And so I decided, screw that, I'm going to do my own. I'm going to make my own. And this was the main reason. Instead, for Motion Sickness, it was just like, it started as a meme inside the Schwarzerblitz server. It was like, you know what? Everyone is complaining about fighting games becoming so easy. Everyone is complaining that, yeah, oversimplification, one button special. And basically say, okay, you know what? I'm taking Fantasy Strike and I do the exact opposite. I was remembering this video from Core A Gaming where he was saying how Fantasy Strike was a perfect in between dive kick and normal fighting games. He was saying there was all these red crosses on motion inputs, crouching, etc. He was saying, okay, you know what? I'm taking this and I'm turning the knob up to 11.
I love it.
This was the idea. Basically, I'm just a crazy person.
I love it.
It shows.
Well, thank you. All right. Next on our panel, we have none other than Love from the Five Force Fighter team. How you doing?
I'm good. What's up, everybody? I'm Love from Kaizen Creed, creative director. Five Force Fighters, a cool 2D-based action fighting game. Obviously, it's action, but it's hand-drawn animations by my younger brother. I wish he could be here, but we can only represent one person, and that's me. But yeah, we've had a lot of fun creating this game and reaching out to the community, showing a lot of our diverse cast of characters and had a positive response from a lot of the people across the world. So it's awesome to be here with some great developers, and I'm just really excited and a little nervous to be with some big heads over here. But yeah, it's really cool.
Don't you sweat. I'm sure you'll hold your own. I look at Five Force Fighters and I'm always fascinated by it. It's like, to me, it's like this combination of like Marvel meets Smash Brothers meets all your crazy anime air dashers. What was your big inspiration behind Five Force Fighters?
If I'm gonna be 100% honest, the inspiration behind the idea of how the game was to be was the idea of me being able to beat my little brother at fighting games. So the only game I was good at was Smash Bros. So we used like the input system of Smash Bros. A little bit of that. Had the traditional sense of Street Fighter, but then matched all the crazy movement from a lot of anime fighters to get that sense and feel that we have in the game. So Smash Bros was a huge inspiration because that's like my main thing. I can play Smash Bros and beat my little brother Light, but he beats me at everything else. We just started playing Street Fighter 5 again. I took a couple matches with Balrog, so I'm not too bad. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. Those were like the big inspirations.
Amazing. Right. Well, third on our panel, we have Matt DeLuca from Mattrified Games.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Matt, or Mattrified as people call me. I'm the dev behind the Battle High series, or at least the newest iterations of it, Murfight, and I'm also the technical designer of Drag Her from Fighting Chance Games.
you are a busy developer, and you've been at this for a while too. So I'm curious where your some of your inspirations for your games have come from.
Well, my inspirations, I'm definitely more of a casual player personally. So my inspirations always kind of take that sort of approachability aspect and trying to do that. I wrote an article in, like, I want to say it was like 2016 about, like, oh, simplifying inputs in fighting games. That kind of caused like half a day of discourse or whatever. But like the real thing I was trying to say was that, like, I wish the games were more pick up and playable. Like, not like, oh, they need to be easy and all this stuff, but it's like limiting that amount of time from someone from picking it up and able to do cool things like faster. And it's like, obviously someone who's, been playing the game for 10 years is going to probably crush someone who just picks it up, but like just minimizing that time I think is important to do for sure. So that's definitely been the influence for things like some of the systems in Battle High have a lot of flexibility to do that, and Murfight is kind of the same thing I was trying to go for, and even Dragher has some of that, like, lowering the barrier just so people can get up and running, not necessarily so people are going to like become, pro players after playing for an hour, but just so, like, hey, I can play with friends and have some bit of success instead of just like, how do I figure out these systems? I'm struggling and not enjoying this. So that's sort of been my approach.
I like it. It's interesting that it's like, some people take inspiration from, styles of games, or, I want to be able to beat my beat my little brother. But for you, it's just like casual pick up and play, right? It's always interesting to me how people get into these, find their inspirations. So next up, we have our last, but certainly not least, we have the Monochromatic Hermit from Monochromesoft, who is also here today.
Hello, I'm MonochramitHermit. I'm the developer of Heatwave, and yeah, I guess that's it.
That's it. Yeah, that's right. This has been your passion for a bit now. How long have you been working on Heatwave?
Probably since I think August of 2019.
Okay.
It's, the main inspiration for it was I was too poor to buy Samurai Showdown, so I was like, I want to make my own Samurai Showdown. So I, it doesn't seem like it. That's where it kind of went, because I eventually was like, let's add an air dash, and then it became an anime fighter. So that's kind of how it happened.
So a little bit of a circuitous path to get to where Heatwave is today.
Yeah.
Okay, well, fantastic. I've noticed Heatwave takes some inspiration from games like Last Blade as well. So you seem to be
Yeah.
pulling from a few different sources, right? Like, what's your background in fighting games? Is mostly like traditional SNK style games, or?
It's kind of just like a mix of everything. I I like playing a lot of old games. They're with, like, sprite graphics, and SNK. I love Last Blade too. It's one of my favorite games. It was the main inspiration for the different kind of fighting modes that I have in Heatwave, like power, speed, and team. But in Last Blade, there's only power and speed. So that was it. And well, my first fighting game was Blazblue Crosstag Battle.
All right.
So that's also kind of a little bit of inspiration from that in the input system.
Fantastic. That's cross tag battle. It's funny. You think people, oh, I got into fighting games with Street Fighter 2, or right, like Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat 3, but no, it's people come into the scene at all different times, right? So that's great. I love seeing that kind of influence spreading into your games. Well, folks, I think now that we've done a little bit of an introduction, now that we've gotten to know who the players are here on our panel, let's get into the crux of it. Let's start off with our first topic here. And just full disclosure, the way I've done these topics, I've set them up so that they're relatively broad. I want you guys to be able to bring your your influences and what matters to you folks to the table for this conversation. So I figured let's start this off, with a pretty broad topic, but let's see where are we at? What is the state of the game of the fighting game community right now? Let's start with Andrea and ask, where do you think we as a genre and a development scene and a community, where are we sitting right now?
Okay, so I don't want to start with controversial opinions, so I will probably start it slow. But from a netcode perspective, we are finally in a good place, or we start finally being in a good place. We needed a pandemic for this, but finally, I mean, the main players are actually starting to pick up on what the indie players already started in 10 years ago. Like, I mean, first a widespread rollback netcode game was one of the first widespread major rollback releases were Skullgirls. Then we had the Punch Planet already in the indie scene in 2016, 2017 already. And we had to wait something like a couple years after that people picked it up, that major Japanese studio picked up the technology properly, not like Street Fighter V. But so I mean, from a technology point of view, I think we are in a very good spot. Like finally, we are able to play against people from all over the world in most major games and almost in many indie games quite well, I would say. But I think that what's missing now from the biggest, let's say, from the biggest player is that the scene is a bit stale. That is, most of the companies are investing either in new installments of the older games or in licensed IPs. I would like to see more original stuff, and this is probably where indie games can cover this niche, at least in my opinion.
I mean, anyone else? Love? Well, where do you think we're standing? What do you think about? Do you think the pandemic has like helped give some of these smaller games like a foothold and a community where that they wouldn't have before? Like people had to create their own solutions. Do you think that's been part of it? Oh, you're muted there, bud.
But I said, yeah, I was like, for sure, I agree with Andre a lot. Rollback has been like a huge thing, like netcode, and having a way to actually, play against people seamlessly is huge. I remember when I was running my Kickstarter, that was like a big thing that um, the other fighting games devs were talking about and the community would be talking about. It's like, we want rollback netcode in your game, things like that. But I also think because of the pandemic and the focus on, very like minute things, people care about, the story that you'll be representing with your characters in your game a lot more than they did before. You have Street Fighter, you have Guilty Gear, which goes crazy with their story, kind of, and then Tekken. But those games, the major hitters don't really emphasize story as much as I think some indie games try to do with their charm. And you have, I think, games like Celeste that have captured like a huge audience because it's so relatable. And I think fighting games in general could do the same thing that those indie games have done for themselves.
All right. I mean, I think that kind of tracks with what Andrea was saying there. Yeah, that there's this demand for these styles of games and this kind of appeal, but that it's not necessarily being delivered by the heavy hitters. I know, Matt, that you've talked about this in the past too. I was curious what are your thoughts on like what's needed, like what is missing from the current state of the FGC?
Well, for me, it's really the hard thing with the indie development is you're up against really big names, right? And you get questions like, why should I play your game over this game? Why should I play, like, for example, Murfight? There's no reason for a big pro player to play Murfight realistically. There's no like big prize money. Like the reason someone like Justin Wong would play Murfight is to maybe make a YouTube video and monetize off that. But there's no like big tournament prize for a pro player to invest the time into my game. So it really comes down to, so that's one challenge. That's one issue with like sort of the indie FGC is sort of this, I don't want to say death of hobbyism, but there's this sort of people have taken game playing into a career, and because of that there's sometimes they look at smaller indie things and they're like, there's really no purpose to play this because I can't monetize it or make content from it or something like that. So that's one challenge for sure, and all those bigger games have all that marketing money to do these big events and things like that. So that's, I think, one challenge of it for sure. One thing that has happened a lot is that the rollback thing that a lot of people have mentioned, that has become more accessible over time. There's a lot more resources on how to implement that in various games. I think GGPO going open Source was definitely part of that as well, and there's a lot of different systems and a lot of different communities. I think Discord, and Discord's not like new per se, but it has helped a lot. Like making a Discord community for Merfight has helped a lot, because that's the other challenge of indie fighting games, is just building a community. Like people always say like, oh, that game's dead. I mean, some indie games, they're practically dead on arrival, because it's like nobody's playing this game. So you have to find a way to build an audience, and things like Discord being out there help a lot with that. So the state, for me, it depends, of course, what your goal is with your game. What's your return on investment? Are you like trying to make money? You're trying to be like the next Evo hit, or are you just doing like a good portfolio piece? So like that is another part of it. Like if you're trying to make tons of money, it's very difficult to sort of get that name, put in those marketing time and money. But if you're just trying to make something to share with people because you're passionate about the genre, that's a little more approachable now. So that's sort of, so the overall state, I feel, is there's still a lot of work and a lot of uphill battles for indie devs to do, but there have been a lot of improvements recently to help people get their stuff out there more, and to get eyes on it, which is great.
All right. And what about you, Mono? You've started making Heatwave in 2019, and yeah, like how has this been for you? Where does indie fighting games and games like Heatwave fit into the wider FGC?
I think it's really interesting that there's kind of like, I feel like there's like a divide between big fighting games and indie fighting games, where people usually don't take indie fighting games as seriously. And I feel like that allows for indie fighting games to maybe be a little bit more creative, because they're not gonna have to worry about, what people think about, like, how competitive things are, or how balanced everything is. And, perfectly balanced in fighting games isn't necessarily like super fun, Like, I think that, a lot of AAA, fighting games, like mainstream fighting games, are kind of trying to be super fair and balanced, like overall, and that kind of leads to their gameplay feeling a little bit, stale. Well, not stale, but kind of samey. Like personally, with Strive, I enjoy Strive a lot, but the gameplay is very, very similar, you know, between different characters, and in how you approach, you know, how you approach the game is very similar to, like, there's not that much diversity. And I feel like indie games, a lot of indie games that I've played have kind of maybe not that indie games don't care about balance or fighting, you know, being competitive. It's that there's kind of like I don't know how to explain this.
I know
What?
I've seen Andrea and Love nodding along here.
Yeah, I feel like they're expressive. You're able to really express your ideas and your personality through your game. With a lot of these indie games, like Merfight has a lot of uniqueness to it. Nobody's gonna come up with a fish fighter game. Like I wouldn't have come up with that. Only somebody who's just like, has their own idea and able to express what they really truly feel about something would come up with something like that. Same with Five Force Fighters. I was feeling like, okay, I want to create a game where I feel like I'm the main character, or like this is what I thought would be cool when I was, 13 years old. And so that's where Five Force Fighters came out with. And you don't really have that with mainstream companies like Street Fighter. You'll always consistently see Ryu. You won't see Ryu in a different type of form. So I don't know if that's what you were going for, Hermit, but that's what I was picking up.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of along that, train of thought.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and Andrea, you had just said it earlier on that you wanted the games that from your youth, right?
Yeah, and obviously my approach was always rule of cool first, balance second. Balance is there because, okay, we had tournaments, but there are also things like one move KO attacks that happened also in a tournament. But is the game less balanced because of it? Maybe, but it's cooler. So definitely, that is, I mean, if you can go for something you like and you can share what you like to other people, I mean, this is what we all do here. We think less about making a game which is balanced at a high level and more a game that it's something that we would love to play ourselves.
Yeah, and this is something I like. I think I see this personally in like a lot of players, where a lot of players look at these fighting games and say it must be competitive. The point of the fighting game is the tournament, right? But it's like very clearly this is not the case. There's so much more to it, and there's so much more value you can get out of them other than just being competitive. And I think you've all done pretty good in your own respective games to highlight that kind of stuff. I mean, like Matt, definitely you've embraced the thematic element of Merfight as a big selling point. You had mentioned that in a previous interview we had done. So like, it seems to be that you folks, do you think there's like, that the fighting game community is in a pretty good state in terms of being able to support those kinds of games? Like, do you think that indie game flair is coming through more and more now?
If I may, I do think one of the nice things with being indie is, and it's sort of cars, there's always these debates in these circles of like, what is really indie? Is Skullgirls indie? They were published by Konami. Does that count? And there's all these dumb little debates, and I get tired of them. But for me, I don't like to disqualify things as indie or not indie, but I do say that the word, indie, independent, it does come with this level of freedom. And all of us, we have this level of freedom that we're not a AAA company, so we don't have tons of investors who want a return on their investment. We don't have hundreds of employees that we have to support and make sure that they're able to be paid, so our game has to make tons and tons of money. So we can experiment more, and we can play around more, and we can do things that, like, people will say, "Oh, I hate this Merfight theme. It's so stupid, and I hate the." And I'm like, I don't care. Don't play it. There are hundreds of other games you could be playing. I'm doing something that I ultimately have wanted to do and want to express in my game. And I feel, AAA games, they don't have that freedom in the same way. Like, I think there was something where they wanted to kill off Ryu in like Street Fighter 3, and then that did really bad in early testings of that game, so they like brought him back and things like that, where it's like, it's also the problem when you have so many sequels of a AAA game, you get into those problems that like Strive had the issues of like they changed the gameplay too much, where people like, this isn't Guilty Gear anymore. So like you had that whole issue that, the longer you keep a series running, you have to always be doing this balancing act between like, we need things that are new or innovative to attract new players, but we need to not, isolate the old player base. And that, is kind of a very heavy constraint on like bigger teams. Now, of course, they have bigger budgets and they can do a lot more. So that's kind of one big advantage over most of us. But we all kind of have that, I think, freedom to try and experiment. And like for me and probably others here, like, sure, we don't want to fail and we want our game to do well, but it's not like the end of the world if it's like, oh, okay, my game didn't do as well as I'd like because maybe some system was a little too experimental or didn't go over as well. It's okay. But like AAA companies, that's kind of a bigger deal. People get laid off, lots of other bad things happen. So I think in that regard, like that's one advantage of like the indie thing. And going back to Merfight for theme, I just wanted a different theme. I've seen so many games with all humans from different countries fighting. I was like, I just want to try something different. And that's really all it came down to.
Well, actually, this leads perfectly into our next topic, which is, what is it like innovating in a terribly conservative and legacy genre like fighting games? Fighting games, they're so tied to their history. Matt, I see you going for the mute button. What do you?
Well, I was muted because I thought someone else was going to speak. But yeah, it's not easy for sure. I know there's a lot of people that are like, I constantly on Merfight, I have a lenient input thing that's kind of like combines easy modes with normal inputs, and there's a lot of people that are like, can I just turn off the easy mode? And I'm like, yeah, I probably could do that eventually if it really came down to it, but I don't want to, because one of the design pillars I'm going for is something that like is approachable to like more people, that they can just pick it up and start playing more quickly. Obviously if a publisher came by and be like, we'll give you tons of money if you take this feature out, I'd be like, all right, maybe I'll think about it, but like,
God.
yeah, it's God. But like that is like it's just things like that where it's like you still want to stick to your guns and stick with the experiment. But yeah, it's definitely hard. There's going to be people who are like, this isn't how you do it. This is wrong. And it's like, no one's really like written. There's no like harsh definition of all these things. There's like common threads, but you don't need to stick to them that much. And it's healthy, I think, for the genre to experiment and help it grow.
I actually have one practical example of this. So GX Grayson is not here delivering up, but I think everyone of us knows Arcus Chroma, right? I remember a discussion I had with him that basically there is a lot of Arcus Chroma has no jump. This is a very unique thing about this game. There is no jump in Arcus Chroma, and I remember a discussion that we had that he was telling that there was many people that were coming into the comments and saying you should add jump to your game. You should add jump to your game. I mean, at this point, I would say instead of doing what people who probably wouldn't play your game anyway do, just focus on the people that would actually are enjoying the game. I mean, it's okay to keep feedback from people that are not playing the game, and I'm honestly open to feedback. But I think when a core part of the design is put in discussion so much, probably you are doing something. You're probably doing something divisive, but could also be that you're doing something right and trying something new. Will it fail? As Matt said, it can be, but it's not something that is failure is an option, okay? But I think it's better than not trying, especially in our case where we don't have a lot at stake. That is, we don't have 10,000 employees or something.
Right? That's because, yeah, it's very much a problem with, I mean, just like the core design principles of fighting games where it's like there's a shoto in every game. There's, right? Like I look at a new fighting game and immediately I look at the characters and I'm like, oh, that's like Zangief. Oh, that's like, he's like Rugal or whatever the case may be. So there's all these points of references, which can be super beneficial for like teaching your players and being able to, create this like cohesive design across a community. But it also ties you down in a lot of ways. So like Andrea, you seem to be saying that as an indie, you're a little less beholden to that. You're less beholden to the like financial repercussions of not following it. But you're still like vulnerable to the community repercussions. So what has been, I'm curious, like Monochrome, like what has been your experience showing your game to the community and doing the different things and the innovative things that you're doing in your game?
I think it's been really interesting. Since mostly I just throw my game on Twitter, and like sometimes people are like, I'll ask a question, say, what do you guys think about this? And you know, people's responses sometimes are, at contrast with what I kind of like want to do with my game,
Mm-hmm.
which is mainly just whatever I want, really, because I don't really have any no one, to tell me what's wrong and what's, how certain ways to do things in fighting games. So I feel like it just allows for a lot more freedom to have a bunch of different systems that I kind of just, play around with, and whatever's fun to me is kind of what I go with. And like I do enjoy feedback, but like if someone, like for example, if someone didn't want me to have, you know, like didn't want double jump in my game, I'm just saying, and you know, I would still keep it in because it's something I enjoy. And or if there was a really in my game, there's a lot of very, very broken combos you can do. And I feel like some people might not like those combos or might think certain characters are very overpowered. But for me, things like that are very fun. You know, I love it when characters can do very crazy and unique things. So that's kind of like my design philosophy, I guess. Like just trying to make it as fun as possible.
I mean, it's interesting because I think like you have some pretty accessible or approachable like inputs, like command inputs for your game, but that's often tied to players have access to less of that cool stuff. But you see all these different mechanics you've layered into your game, which make it super expressive for a player. I mean, is that one of the things that you're trying to do? Like, is it your way to innovate is how do you mesh that easy to access, but still super deep?
Yeah. In like, inputs, I generally keep them pretty simple because I don't want super complicated, super pretzel motions or whatever. But I think that, you know, that's not like a major, simplifying or making it easier isn't something that's like a main driving factor of, how I design the game. And I think that it's just, I don't, it's just, sorry. Um, so
So that wasn't what you were necessarily after. It's like it's not that you're designing for the approachability.
yeah, it's more like I'm just designing, because like personally, I can't do DP motions on keyboard. So that's why most
Okay.
of the DPs are down motions. So, because, I test on keyboard. So it's kind of like I'm designing the game for me and hoping other people enjoy it as well,
Okay. So yeah, you're not necessarily thinking consciously about like being the innovator within the genre. You're just like you kind of I'm beyond that.
Yeah.
All right. I was gonna say about Five Force Fighters. I know you're doing a couple different things with like the way your knockout system works, the way your systems all interlink. What has been your experience trying to innovate in what is like a legacy genre?
I feel like Five Force's systems are very like the interconnectivity of them is kind of amazing. In my head, it feels really cool when your focus system works with your force system and things like that. Because my game has a lot of different mechanics and different bars right now. There's three, but they one of them is more of like a passive bar that kind of introduces more movement abilities, more passive abilities of you like being able to defensive options and things like that. Um, but it's been really cool. It's been really fun to get feedback from the players. It's also been really fun and cool to see how people kind of break your system. Like you might want it to work one way, but they're doing it in a different way. And I'm just like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. I remember like we had a little tournament in I think Vegas, and it was just a bunch of kids, playing the game. They were trying to. We had a little pot, like a little panel, and we were talking about the game, and we let them try it out, and they were able to pull off the combos the way we expected them to. And then we went back, we're like, oh, that makes sense. It's maybe not as straightforward as we thought it would be when you just pick it up. So innovation is really cool, but it's at the same time, I think being able to properly explain what you're doing in your game is powerful. And I think tutorials are the best for new games. Having a tutorial is probably going to be key for most games like ours, where you're really bringing in something new.
All right. Anyone else have some thoughts on the being tied to the legacy of fighting games? None of you find it really difficult to break out of that? It seems like you're just like, no, we don't even mind. Guilty Gear gets to do its own thing. I'm doing my thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
after having, oh sure, sorry, Matt, go.
Oh, well, I was going to just simply say that's sort of there's Love mentioned tutorials, which I think is really important and part of the like good and bad challenge of being indie in that we don't have the legacy and reliance on like 5 other sequels. So people play Street Fighter 5, they're like, I played 2 through 4, no problem. I kind of can figure out what to do this with literal tutorialization. But when you go into a completely new game, it's like, yeah, I can innovate and do different things and try different things, but I need to explain that. And that's kind of a challenge in today's game space, because like this isn't the arcade anymore where I can like pop in a quarter and try it and like quickly play. It's like, here, there's my game. You have like 5 minutes for someone to evaluate it, and then they're like, I don't like it. Here's hundreds of games I can play in other PC platforms every day, not to mention console. So like you have to be able to get players up and running quickly. And so like we get some advantages by not being legacy, but there's definitely some challenges with being not legacy, and that is one of them, like having to get players in.
All right, that's actually, Matt, you're providing me with all the best segues. I really appreciate it. Because one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about, moving on to the next topic, onboarding new players. This is part of the fighting game discourse, folks. Okay, listen, we're going to get into the meat of it. I want to start some internet fights. Let's go. Put up your dukes. All right. Onboarding, how are we going to do this? Like, this has been a struggle for fighting games for a very long time. There is this perception that fighting games are like super difficult on a level that other games are just not, right? And I don't personally think that's true, but I do think we have a problem with getting players to understand what's going on with fighting games. So where do you folks see how we onboard players now and where we need to go with onboarding new players?
I think the biggest issue is that fighting games in general, not only indie, also bigger fighting games, if you lose in a fighting game, you can't blame your teammates. So, and this is something that looks like a big turn-off for a lot of players. That is, if you fail, it's because of your fault. And that is, there are a lot of scrub quotes account. The scrub quotes account on Twitter is full of quotes like this. And basically, in my opinion, it actually shows a inherent problem of the genre. That when you are playing in a 1v1 game, if you lose, it's all your fault, and nobody really likes to lose. And fighting games are one of the genre in which the older the game, the easier it is to get into someone who has played for 200 hours and to lose 10 or 15 matches in a row. And a lot of people losing after a 10 loss streak, they would probably start looking for something else to play. And I think there is no tutorial that can actually help this. That is, even if we have better tutorials to onboard players, the issue is that there is a huge difference between learning the game in the comfort of your home, looking at tutorial, and actually playing it against other people. I have experienced it myself. I sort of a lab beast. That is, I play more training mode than actual matches against people. A friend of mine was actually a very instinctive player, like no tutorials, just push buttons, just try stuff until it works. It's one of the hardest matches I have to play because it's just going instinctively. It's not mashing buttons, it's just playing, and I'm just short-circuiting my brain because what I labbed, what I trained, what I get into tutorials is not what happens in a real match. This also happens when I play. That is, sometimes I play Tekken 7 semi-regularly. The amount of matches I won by using a gimmicky move or something that shouldn't work in any possible way, like a very slow unblockable with 2 seconds of wind up or something, it's just something that people don't expect it because it's not that something that a tutorial can teach you. It's unfortunately in my opinion, the only way to really learn the game is to play the game, at least in what I experienced myself. That said, we need tutorials because these at least make it easier to get to the first step. And now, since I leave it to my colleagues.
Love, you were you look like you had something to say there.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I think what it could be to help more people, join fighting game or join the fighting game community is that sense of progression. If there was like maybe some type of way to make a game feel like you're progressing through it, you'd feel like it isn't really as repetitive. I think single player content would actually be huge if it was integrated properly or in a fun way. And it's not just story. It's like maybe your character levels up or something. I watched a video one time. I can't remember the game, but it's like this lion guy with a sword, and it's like a Capcom game. I can't remember what the game's called, but it has
Is
like
it Nidhogg?
What's up?
Is it Nidhogg?
It
No,
might.
I think you're thinking Red Earth or Warzard.
Oh yeah, I think it's Red Earth. It's the one with the lion. Yeah, yeah. And it has like all these bosses that you
Lion.
can
Sorry, my
fight.
bad.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And I was watching, I was like, this would make me want to play a fighting game if I wasn't into fighting games. Um, and I think just having that in and incorporating that type of system, like, and that's your main focus, and then you can also fight people would be cool and really fun. I was actually talking to my brother about Street Fighter in general. When you fight other players, it's like fighting a boss in any other game, like over and over. Like every character is their own boss, and you have to learn those combo patterns. You got to learn their tricks, and it depends on who you're playing against too. So when you're playing against a different Link on Smash Bros, it's different from my Link. It's different from your Link. So it's like a whole different character altogether. So yeah.
I love that. I love that as an idea because you're right. It's not just about tutorials. That's part of it. We need to be able to teach people how to play these games, but you also need the players who are there. You need to be able to have the players in order to be able to teach them, right?
Mhm.
So, right, if there's no reason for someone to get into a fighting game because hey, I sat down and it took me 30 minutes to. I mean, it was the Bearsys developer just on Twitter today was talking about this. The time to Hadouken, right? It should take you less than 10 minutes between when you boot up the game to be able to throw a Hadouken, which is one of the cool things you do in fighting games, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, you want to be able to cut down on that, right? And do the cool stuff. And that cool stuff can also be, single player content. Where do you folks think is something that we could do better as game makers to really provide something of value and of substance to those kind of players to onboard them through the single player content? Hermit, I know you're working on some story mode stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I think story modes are like a really good way to maybe introduce the characters and like kind of like the story of the world, but maybe not as, at least I haven't seen many story modes that are very good at kind of teaching you how to play the game or um, kind of introducing you to the game's mechanics. They're either more like, just like side extra content, like kind of like how Guilty Gear Story is basically just a movie, and or they're arcade modes where it's only gameplay and there's not much of you know teaching. So I feel like there needs to be some kind of like balance between them where it's kind of like kind of easing the player into a you know into the game, and also still having the fun kind of single player aspect of most story modes.
Anyone else?
Matt,
Yeah.
Maddie, were you gonna go?
You can go first. I have some stuff on the topic as a whole, but you could go if you have something related to story mode and single player.
Yeah, just something really quick. There's this game called like Dragon Ball Z Advanced Adventure. It's like a GBA game. And so it had like a fighting game system and also like an adventure mode. And going off of what Herman said is it had like a progressive system with its story by like having you do like beat 'em up stuff. But then within the story, it would transition into like the fighting game mode where you're held in like strict fighting game restrictions, like how you would play a fighting game. And it was slightly different from what the combat was previously. And I thought that was extremely interesting when I was a little bit younger, that they were able to incorporate two different types of fighting systems in a game, like a beat 'em up and a traditional fighter. And, you were just able to really experience and have a lot of fun with both of them seamlessly. So I thought that was really dope.
You actually because you mentioned that like playing it was mentioned that playing a fighting like another person in a fighting game is like playing a boss character, right? It's like that's what
Yeah,
I want to see. I want to see you playing through a story mode. You play against the AI. When you get to the boss, it matches you up with someone online.
that's really cool. That'd be really
Okay,
dope.
great. I want to see it. The next two games you folks, I saw as Andrea and Love are just like holy. I want more of that.
This, you know what? This could be. This is so crazy that it could actually work.
That would be really cool. Don't let Capcom hear that.
Yep. Yo, patent pending. Patent pending.
They would patent it.
Yeah, no one would be able to use it for 40 years exactly. Matt, I know. So you said you had some more topics, more like generally about it.
Generally about difficulty and stuff in general, but going to single player, I think the important thing and the reason why it's important, especially for indie fighters, is we don't have story legacy to build off of like other games. And single player mode is a lot of brand building. It's a lot of what is this brand? Why are these characters fighting? Who are they? And that helps players learn. We don't have instruction manuals for people to flip through anymore with nice art and whatnot. So that's sort of the important thing for me when it comes to single player content. And it's for something for players to do when there's downtime or they don't want to play online for whatever reason. Brand building, and then also it does teach players how to play a little bit. It teaches basics. It teaches, okay, this is how what is the basics of this game. It's not going to teach them like, oh, I beat single player on the hardest difficulty, I can win any match now. It's like, no, you're not. No, that's not going to how it's work. You've mastered how to fight the AI and you know the game systems, but fighting different players is an extremely different thing. And then for the entire topic as a whole, I'm kind of over the whole like, are fighting games hard? Are they easy? Is they accessible? It's like hard is such a subjective term anyway, because it's like what's hard to me might not be hard to someone else, and then it's just like, yeah, you could try to distill like what makes the genre hard, and like you could get a few objective things, but it's not gonna like help solve the problem as a whole. Games can only do so much. There's tutorials and in-game teaching and instructions and wikis and all that. But there's two other components that I think are really important that like most games can't do themselves. One is like the players in that community. Do you have nurturing players? Do you have players that are going to help new players and not gatekeep and actually teach? Like, that's the great thing about like the Discord, when you have a player who's really into the game and wants more people to play and is willing to teach and sit down and say, oh, okay, let's play some matches and I'll explain like how the game works, what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, etc. That's extremely important for any game, let alone an indie fighter. But then, it also comes down to the player, and like kind of like when I mentioned return on investment earlier for an indie dev, like what as a dev I want out of my game. What does a player want out of the game? Why are they playing this genre? Like if it's not making them happy or they're just frustrated by it or they think it's too hard, maybe it's just not for them. And I think game design has a problem where we try to get everyone to play our game. Like we want everyone to play our game, and it's such it feels awful to just be like, it's not for you, but like that is the reality. Like some devs don't want to just say this game is not for you, sorry, play something else. And that's just the reality both of the genre, some of the indie games, and some of like the bigger titles. That's just, it's actually better to focus on an audience more than trying to shotgun everybody. And I feel when we have these, are fighting games too hard, are they too easy, whatever discussions, we're trying to shotgun and get everyone in the world playing the genre, and like that's just not going to happen. Like sure, little things we can do to tweak and get more people interested is great, but you're just not gonna do it for everybody. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah,
and of course, again, sorry, doesn't mean we shouldn't try, because I do think that's the other problem is we have people who are like, oh, we just, these problems can't be solved. And it's like, no, you have to try and do as much as you can, but you're not going to solve it for everybody. And that's sort of the reality you need to face.
Mm-hmm.
Before we change topic, I just wanted to actually go back to the single player content thing, because we are talking about indie games, and in my opinion there is one. So okay, before going for that, Schwarzer Blitz had a 5 hours long story mode with around 600 pre-rendered pictures. And okay, I say 5 hours, but I have a friend, this institute friend from the last time that has not finished it yet after 12 hours. I don't know, it's possible, but maybe we got stuck on the lobster. But about that, going back, there is one game, in my opinion, that does a very good job at single player content in our indie scene, and it's Beatdown Dungeon. I don't know if you guys have played it. The point is, Beatdown Dungeon, so for those who don't know the game, Beatdown Dungeon is a simplified Guilty Gear-like game where the single-player content is as a roguelite. Basically, you have dungeon crawling, and the fights against the NPCs are fighting game fights. and the NPCs become gradually more competent. And the first is just the Tofu Man, which does a couple very simple attacks, but then you start having monsters that attack low, monsters that use assist, monsters that block, and you build up and you basically see all the fighting game mechanics in a ramp. It's honestly incredibly well made, and I think it's probably peak single player content I have found in an indie fighting game until now, because it's a single player mode with a lot of replayability due to the randomization of the dungeon rooms, and a tutorial in disguise, because you are learning the game by playing. Okay, this was the intent. Actually, some players found infinites, and then so you could actually power through single player mode by using a specific character and repeating one single combo over and over. But this was not the intent. But the idea was very solid, and I think that the way they're approaching it with the sequel, Demon Day, is actually good for that, because it's now a JRPG sort of stuff with the same idea. And honestly, I would to say in our circle, I think this is the most solid single player mode that I have found.
I really like that because so basically the AI or your opponents get modified, introducing more and more mechanics, like you said, that ramp up in getting people into understanding all the things. And that's one of the first things I was saying with onboarding players, right? Where it's a struggle. I think if we look at the AT&T Annihilation Cup drama that just recently took place, you had a player who was an Apex Legends player who went in and played in a competitive Street Fighter V setting and got upset at the level of difficulty that was required of him to play the game. Now, I think part of the problem there was that he skipped the ramp. He was like, I'm here at the bottom of the ramp and I need to be here because I'm at the top of the ramp as an Apex Legends player, right? And then skipped everything in the middle and said it's too hard. It's like you never got the build up. This is like hopping into a rhythm game on, super expert and being like, yeah, of course I should. No, you shouldn't be able to do all that stuff, right? So I like that idea of you can gradually bring them in at like the tutorial in disguise, and I think you can do it. Mattrified, Matt, you're doing something with the modifications in Merfight that you've been talking about, like modified features in your fights where you might not be able to block or not be able to crouch, or right. You can do it from the other end as well. You can modify what the player can do as well as what the AI can do to help teach these skills and these mechanics.
Well, the modifiers in Merfight story mode that I'm playing are mostly because I know the AI is not going to be the strongest, because AI programming is not my favorite area of expertise. But going back to Beatdown Dungeon, one challenge with fighting games, if we are going to talk about objective things, is they give you all the tools immediately. There's no like unlocking. Like I know in some action games, you can't do as much, and then over time there's like, here's a new skill, here's a new combo you learn, here's a new type of enemy. In fighting games, just like it's all on the table. It's like, here's every tool. There's no like, when was the last game that had unlockable characters that were like tournament viable, right? Like Street Fighter 4 maybe. But like there's just been so like, that is one objective challenge, and single player experiences like Beatdown Dungeon, I think are interesting because they are doing that traditional ramp that I don't quite know if a normal fighting game can do as well, because people just want to start playing, at that high level right away. For sure. And like, for example, yeah, if there was like some kind of ramp for that AT&T tournament that was like, you have to do XYZ first before you can even enter, there probably would not have been that level of discourse related to it, because that person either would have learned and taken the steps, or they just wouldn't have been allowed to enter. So yeah.
Anybody else have thoughts? Mono, you've been a little bit quiet.
Yeah, going back to, I think there's in like a lot of single player games, like I kind of thought of Metroidvania type games, and usually they lock the harder areas behind, behind like upgrades and unlockable like keys or whatever. And I feel like fighting games, there's no unlockable, like unless you're playing against the computer controlled player, there's no really unlockable progression of from easy to difficult, if you're, especially for like some older games where some people might have been playing for like years and years, and you're a new player coming in, and if you get matched up with them, it's just like you're going right to the final boss of the game.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of like I think a lot of competitive games might have the same type of issue where it's harder to have players always start at the easiest point and work their way up.
Mm.
Well, I mean, I think this might be a good opportunity to take a little bit of a break, take a little bit of a fiver, unless we have any final thoughts on onboarding our new players. All right, Matt.
I would be curious if in the future, if we're talking about future games and future attempts of a game like Beatdown Dungeon, where you do level up online and you can only play level 1 versions of the characters that are simpler, and then as you continue to win online, you unlock a level 2 and you unlock level 3 versions of the characters that are more full and have more tools. That would be an interesting thing I would love to see. However, you would have the problem of some people be like, I don't want to wait. I want to go to level 3 right away. And that is sort of, I think, a challenge of competitive games in general, but especially this genre.
I mean,
Yeah.
once again, harking back to the like legacy stuff, people have this knowledge already. They don't want it gated. Sorry, Love, you were saying?
Maybe.
Oh no, I wasn't saying anything. I was just agreeing. I was like, yep.
Oh, okay.
That yeah.
I
Andrea?
was thinking maybe, Matt, one possibility to do this will be, okay, giving the possibility to start already at level 3, but giving incentives to who's actually going to level 3 through the steps. I don't know, special costumes, something that the people who are not grinding cannot get with money or something. So that it's either you put time to get it, or you just jump in and you don't have these nice perks, etc. You can still play the game, but if you play it properly, you get something more than the people who aren't playing it properly inverted commas. There is no proper way to play such a game. Understand me? Let's say intended by the developer. It's something that could be worth exploring.
It seems like this is turning into like a development conference. We're just dropping ideas for new games.
I mean, that was part of it. I wanted to be able to celebrate all of the creators and the games in our scene, but also kind of do some collaboration and cooperation. So hopefully, I'm glad the ideas are flowing.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool.
All right. Well, I think we're going to take a little 5-minute break, folks. Go get yourself some waters. We're going to let our panelists' brains calm down for a sec, and we're going to come back, I think, and pop into some more fierce discourse, some fierce drama. All right. We will see you on the other side, everyone. Take a look at this cool stuff in the meantime.
Oh, this won't do.
Huh, you're nothing but a warpath.
Impressed? Intimidated? Doesn't matter, and neither do you.
The aquatic may forgive you, but I won't.
You can't stop me.
Crawl along. I have no quarrel with you.
Come on, aboard already!
Let's see if you're worthy of my knowledge.
I'm getting too old for this.
A new protege.
You're already washed up.
Don't worry, you're next.
You're not worthy of my throne.
You're barely a snack.
Hey, that's me, Pebbles. Let's see if they made you look good. Try to find someone with more style. It's not about style, it's about winning. Oh, I win. But some of us are interested in artistry. Oh, is that what that is? I guess you do look pretty foul. Time to show you what I can do. God, do you hear that? You can almost hear the bones breaking. Not bad, Coco, not bad. Not quite as good as me, but not bad. Oh, who is this? I don't know, never seen her before. Nah, for real, I would definitely remember her. My God, that's Shrink. You crushing on her? I don't even know her, bro. That's never stopped you before. Ah, come on. She's something special. So this is Blaine. Woo! Man's on fire. Literally. Might get burned facing him. You think he's hot-headed? He does look pretty angry. Just give me a bucket of water. That might do the trick. Oh shit. Wait, no, I remember this guy from the other visions. Yeah, that's Strail Chief. Just goes by Strail though, I think. He's really making waves. He got a slick tongue too. Probably get all the bits. Hey, chill.
Is all of our audio coming through, Matt? Oh, sorry, safety man.
Yes. Okay, now. Pull up. Not yet.
All right.
Sorry, I have to cut that trailer out short. Was it this one? Yeah, there we go.
Hey, welcome back,
Hey.
everybody. Like I said, here with Safety Man. I hope you folks have been enjoying checking out some of those trailers there. We got, we got a bunch of indie games here. Man, I hope you folks are seeing some stuff that you haven't necessarily seen before, and y'all go check it out. Of course, we are here. Like I said, myself, Mr.MKL, Safety Man on the dials, and our four panelists, the indie game luminaries, as I'm calling them.
Oh, the great
yes,
names.
I made someone cringe.
Indie luminaries? Dang.
Yeah, no, we got some fine developers here though.
You'll find out. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, we got Andrea D. We got Love from the Five Force Fighters team. We got Matt from Mattrified Games and MonochramitHermit from Monochromesoft. We're gonna keep getting into it. Safety, is there something you?
No, I was just gonna say indie luminaries. That's something I'm gonna put in my next Wordle attempt.
The indie luminaries. Yeah, indie game luminaries for sure.
All right. Gonna cut to the 5 screen and we'll continue with the topics.
Absolutely. We're gonna keep getting into it, folks. We've been talking about a bit. We've talked about some game design stuff. We've been talking about, approachability and approachable design. And I know it can get really tiresome talking about it, but I want to actually hear from you folks what you think about, is there this trend towards approachability that's actually happening in fighting games? Like, is this a real thing when people talk about it? I see so many games that are still very, very complex and allow players to do a whole lot more. But there's this perception, I think, amongst the wider FGC that folks, that the games are really trending in this way to become more approachable and less diverse in the technical ways that traditional fighting game players like. Like, is this thing real? Is this a bad thing? Is it a good thing? I'm curious what y'all think. Maybe we'll start with Mono here.
I think, I don't know, my thoughts are complicated on this because I do love really complicated games, but I think sometimes things are a little too complicated. like I think it's good to have simple games and complicated games. I think there's places in the FGC for both games that kind of are a little bit more simplified and a little bit more complicated. And I feel like a lot of new games that are coming out are kind of maybe a little bit of a balance between them, where at the surface it might not seem like that's very complicated, or it might seem like there's only one way to play. But I feel like the new Melted Blood game, I feel like it might seem a lot more simplified than the previous, the old Melted Blood game, but I feel like there's still some complexity there. And I'm not sure which direction, if more fighting games get released, they're going to get simpler and simpler. But I think there can still be a balance between, complicated and simple. Like I know some games have, no motion inputs, and I think that's fine and it can work as long as you design the game around working that way.
Okay, yeah, because I know all of you actually in all of your games, you have some level of, what would be considered like approachable design, whether it be lenient inputs or, whatever the case may be. I know Five Force Fighters handles it more like Smash. Merfight has its own unique lenient input system. I mean, motion sickness is an entire play on approachability. So, like, yeah, I feel like you folks will have some idea here where it's like, do you think that is a thing? Is it like, is Street Fighter less complicated and that makes it and that is a bad thing for fighting games as a whole?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think for big mainstream games, they're probably making it a bit more approachable because you want more people to try out your game, you want more people to play your game, and I think they're adding systems, more so adding systems to make it a little bit easier. In Tekken, I just recently saw it. There's like a quick menu that you can have quick inputs, like just with a button, and you can go through that system and add if you want to, instead of pressing triangle and square or something at the same time, you can just make it like the top left trigger or something like that. And that simplifies it, but you still have the ability to keep the game's difficulty to where you want it. So approachability doesn't always mean that you're getting rid of the complexities. It can also mean that you're adding an option um, for your players who are brand new or are already veterans to try out the game in a different way. So I think approachability is not necessarily a bad thing or takes away from fighting games at all. It's kind of just depends on how you implement it into your game. You just you have to be smart about it.
Yeah, well, I think that the best of both worlds would be if the approachability options could be optional or toggleable. I'm saying this because there was a discourse about auto combos in fighting game, right? These auto combos were considered by some people the root of all evil, by someone prophetic line. There was a lot of discourse about auto combos. But what I found out is when I play against my friends, so I don't have a lot of friends that is not online that are like fighting games, and when I play against them, actually they find the games which have this level of approach, like Dragon Ball Fighters or even stylish mode in Blazblue, continuum shifts extend. They actually can do something instead of just fighting against the inputs. So I think that actually these measures are perfectly fine. So sometimes we think only about the core players, those who actually know how to do an Hadouken out of the spot or that already have experience in fighting games. But sometimes there are also players that are not really into the genre, but they would just like to enjoy it, like for an evening with friends, etc. And I think that these approachable measures like stylish mode, auto combos, etc., are a good way for these kind of people who would like to enjoy the game, but they don't want to sink a lot of time into it. And in my opinion, they are cool. Just make it toggleable so that if someone doesn't want to use it, or I don't know, that they are not allowed in ranked or something like that. So give the choice, I would say. But I'm not against people simplifying, making fighting games more accessible, because there are a lot of people that will benefit from it. people would like to play them, but either they physically cannot, or that they don't have the dexterity. So I would say accessibility is not bad. How this influences the design, it's instead a bit more complicated, and I don't have an answer
Yeah,
to that.
the implementation seems to be the tricky part, right? And I think that's where a lot of folks are stumbling, even in their enjoyment of them, right? Where it poorly implemented approachable design can oftentimes be a deterrent, right? Like you said, it doesn't appeal to the core thing of the thing of the core fighting game player enjoys. All right, well, we had discussed that a bit more. I mean, is there? I guess that's the big question. You're not sure. Maybe Matt. Do you have any thoughts on the proper implementation? Like, what would be an appropriate implementation of these lenient systems?
The challenge of this topic as a whole is, like, of course, I think over time everything gets more accessible. We improve UI and UX and every asset and facet of different technologies and games over time. Like a game from the 90s is not the same as now. There's going to be usability features and accessibility features implemented in them. And the problem I find is there's two parts. One, accessibility, I'm a little nervous in game design is becoming a buzzword. People are just like, air game's accessible, but that is such a broad concept. Like it could be, people say theming can be, you know, is your game accessible to a wide audience and different people are able to understand the game? There's color blindness, there's audio accessibility. There's so many things that topic covers. So of course, fighting games are getting more accessible over time because we're keeping these things in mind. Like KOF 15 has the ability to make the background darker so that you can see the players more clearly. But it feels like the big one and the controversial one is inputs. I wrote about it once a couple years ago, and it was a thing for a little bit. And like, it's, well, they have improved over time because they are more lenient. They're not as strict as they used to be, for sure. And like older games, I remember Mortal Kombat 2 has really bizarre inputs for some of its special moves. I went to play an arcade version of that a long time ago, and I was like, I don't even remember how to do half this stuff because they're just like forward, down, forward and stuff, and just for like a special. But I don't think it's bad to make the input more accessible, but I do think recently there's been a little overboard where that's the focus and there's other areas to focus on. There's clarity of choices, there's UI and UX, like how many meters does this character have? And when you start having, every character has 5 meters, you're just like, that's going to be really overwhelming to a new player. There's a lot of other things that if you're going to do input simplification, you have to rebalance it somewhere else. Like maybe your timing now needs to be more strict and there needs to be other areas where you make up that essentially, because I think that's the problem where if you just take Street Fighter and you're like, well, now everything is a simple forward and a button or one button special, it's going to be a very different game and not probably enjoyable, especially by people who enjoy that genre or that series. So I think that's like, of course, so overall, I think definitely the games are getting more accessible, but I think designers, both of big and small titles, kind of need to go like inputs are not the first thing. They're not the only thing to look at to make something accessible and approachable, for sure.
All right. Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I think that's part of the fear that a lot of players have is that if you just change the input method as more to be more approachable and don't consider anything else, then yes, it will end up something that's probably not good. But I mean, I'd like, it's very clear that like from this this panel here that like you're thinking about these things in far more layers, right? And it's like you're not just going to replace the input method and say, and I'm done, right? There are other considerations at play. So I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty fair that it's like, okay, I guess it seems like this might be a real trend, right? But the maybe some of the doomsaying is a little overblown. All right, well, let's do this. Let's move on. We got a lot of more stuff to talk about, folks. We had already discussed some of the approachability stuff in the previous topics as well. But let's switch gears a bit. Let's get more. This is going to be a little bit more like technical, you know, behind the hood game dev stuff. Like when it comes to you running your businesses, monetizing your game. How we've had a lot of talk recently about free-to-play games. free-to-play fighters is apparently going to be a thing. It's already a thing with some games, so there's been some different implementations. What are some of the considerations that you as designers and developers have for monetizing your game and getting them out there to people?
I would honestly ask Matt to start because I personally I haven't monetized a single game I made until now, so I'm the least qualified person to talk about it. But so Matt or Mono, because both they have commercial games.
Well, this is a wide topic, the whole free to play thing, because I just launched Mattrified with a very traditional, just like $12, play it, whatever. And the free to play stuff's kind of started like 2 or 3 days later, and I was like, ugh, I kind of wish I would have done that. But free to play is such a weird, I hate saying the phrase slippery slope, but it's very like it can get out of hand very fast depending on what people let happen now and then years from now. Like I think Killer Instinct is the best example of like a free to play implementation. You kind of get the game for free. You get a few characters to try it. So it's almost like a glorified demo. And then you're like, okay, I like the game. I want to buy more characters. I want to buy some DLC to support the devs. It's all cosmetic almost. And like, that's great. But what makes me nervous about free to play discussion is all these sort of like ugly stuff that can come out of it in the future if it becomes like the big thing. And I'm talking like ads every 3 matches. Tekken Revolution kind of had that quarter system, so like we could see a return of that. There's a lot of different systems that, I could dream up like one of the worst monetizations for a fighting game, and I could see a bigger company wanting to do it in the future just to be like, well, we're the big legacy title, we're the big IP, and everyone's going to want to play it because we have $1 million tournament, except you have to pay, get training mode tokens, just crap like that. That would just make people so angry. But like, what would you do, right? What if it's like Capcom Cup, Street Fighter 6? It's free to play, but training mode is, $1 an hour, or you could subscribe to it for 15 and just play it nonstop for a month. Like, are the things that could happen long term if developers want to do that. And that is because that's free to play. A lot of other genres, it's stuff like that. And I think competitive games do kind of stop it to a degree. Like you can't do like Candy Crush can do like pay to win because it's a single player game. You can't really do pay to win in Street Fighter because it's extremely unfair. I mean, you could do it, but people would hate it. But it's just sort of that, like, if you're making money from it, like bigger developers are like, we don't really care. Because that's the one thing with free to play that makes it risky from a developer standpoint is you put in this investment into it and you start in the red. So you're just like, how can we make money if people aren't just paying $60 for it from scratch? So like, these are things I would never personally do. So I don't want people to be like, oh, Mattrified 2 is going to be free to play and like training mode for like, a subscription per character per month or anything like that. But I'm saying I could see like a really gross future of these things happening if,
Let's stop. Don't give Capcom ideas. We've already
if they are smart, they will not listen to me. But
yes. Here are all the ways to do it wrong, right?
Yes.
Oh.
But like, it does make me wonder what Multiverses and Project L are going to do, because people are saying those are going to be 2 free-to-play games. So it is really curious, like, are they going to do anything like that, where it's like, I paid extra, now I have 2 life bars instead of 1? Like, what are they going to do? Like, I doubt they're going to do anything like that, but they could, and we don't know.
I mean, okay, this is fascinating to me because you're right. You've done a pretty standard early access release for Mattrified, Matt. Andrea, you said that you haven't charged for your games at all. They've all been free. Just download and play. Mono, you've done something similar, right? Your game is up on itch for a price in early access, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's in early access, and I feel like as a player, I really, really do not ever want to have free-to-play fighting games. That's just a big yikes from me. And I don't know. I really hope it doesn't become the norm, because a lot of, I feel like it will kind of, I think I've talked about this before, I think, but from a like games preservation standpoint, I think it will be a very, very bad decision. Like I can go, buy a like 20-year-old fighting game and have everything that it came with, But even with like, current fighting games that are out now, like in like 10, 20 years, are you going to be able to buy all the DLC characters? Are you going to be able to, like even if there's no online, are you still going to be able to like if there's certain modes locked behind, you know, DLC, are you going to be able to play those modes? Probably not, unless
No.
there's some way that they preserve that or, maybe at the end of its lifetime they'll unlock it for everyone. I don't know, but I just feel like from that point of view, I don't think free-to-play fighting games are a good thing for the future.
Yeah, even if they weren't like a predatory free-to-play monetization model, even if it wasn't, bad for the competitive scene, it's still bad for games preservation and long-term being able to actually access these titles.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting. I think that's not something that's necessarily been in the wider discussion amongst the free-to-play conversation. Love, you're actually going about it slightly differently. You got a Kickstarter running or had a Kickstarter going, right, for Five Force Fighters. So, like, how does this, like, it's not just free to play. It's like the way you monetize your games is varied, right? And it's like you can do subscription models, you can do free to play, you can do whatever the case may be. And you've decided to go to the community. Like, what has that process been like? And like, do you feel it provides you an advantage to go that way?
I think Kickstarters do provide an advantage in a sense because it's a big risk, you're putting yourself out there. There's a chance that you might fail, and if you do fail, you have to once again go back to your community and ask them for help, and they might not believe in you the second time, or they're just like, hey, good job, you're going back for it. So monetization, I know I want to like fully release the game, price wise in the future, but I have no experience, like Andrea was saying, like no experience with monetization besides, doing a Kickstarter and people, donating and helping out with the development of the game. Uh, but besides that, it's just been, constantly, putting out more information, letting them test out the game, the people that, got a certain tier, things like that. Is the furthest extent that I've gone with monetization and, feeding the community my game.
I'm curious, like, are you concerned about that? Like, I mean, games are expensive to make. This is
Mhm.
something they are expensive, right? And either with it be money, time, resources, whatever the case. And there's that triangle of like, time spent, money spent, and effort, or basically, right? And it's like, how do you manage that, right? Like, is you have the advantage of having at least some funds to fund your development,
Yeah.
um, right? But like, are you able to sell the game for $40, and whatever your expected player base becomes, is that going to actually fund it, or are you just going to say, I'm going to put in way more time and then sacrifice the cost, right? Like, where's that leaning for you?
Um, Shoot. I mean, it's like I feel like it's more playing by ear at this point, because it's my first experience with anything this big. And so I'm taking it step by step, talking to people that have more experience than I do. Getting that type of mentorship is valuable in this industry, I feel. Like talking to other developers like these guys here, or seeking out information from, other developers that are kind of seniors where we're at. Uh, so I think I think the big thing is just like not stretching too thin, trying to keep as many resources as you can and making smart moves and smart plays, and using money when it's necessary. If it can be done internally, we'll do it internally. If it can't be done internally, we'll seek a little bit of help. But I think the process has been enlightened. It's enlightening. So I'm just glad we're doing it.
I mean, I'd be curious. So this is, I mean, I think this is inherently connected here. Are games too expensive? Right? I mean, Matt, you've set your game at, you said $12. I think Monochrome, it's 15. I'm not sure what Five Force Fighters is going to be retailing for.
Probably like 20.
Probably 20, right? So you're all in the $10 to $20 range. I've seen games like Robo O, which sells for like $2 US, which is insanely like it's Foxy Boxy Games puts a great amount of effort into that game. It's
It's
really
a
well
steal.
supported. It's a steal. How is it only $2, right? But there's always a fight with players about games are too expensive. Why am I paying $60, $80 for a game? I mean, are they? Should you just be saying, look, the game's going to cost $100 because that's what it costs to develop?
The issue is that in a vacuum, this would be the perfect way to go. So in a vacuum, if your game was the only one on the market, you could say, yeah, I have this game with 4 characters that I spent 3 years developing, and I have to put it for $50 because it is actually paying my expenses and what I paid to put it into production. But reality is that players will always compare your games to the big ones. Even if you're an indie, there is no way out. That is, in the moment in which someone says, okay, Heatwave plays like Guilty Gear, or Schwarzenblitz is a poor man's Tekken, or you cannot escape this. And so, unfortunately, pricing becomes a function of what is already on the market. You cannot, unfortunately, charge $70 for a game that, okay, you spent 5 years doing it. You should definitely have a $70 price tag if you would take into account all the development time, resource time, money poured in for, I don't know, paying voice actors, paying your collaborators, paying for art commissioning. But unfortunately, the answer is that you can't, because you are not playing alone. There is competition. Nobody's going to pay $70 for your 4 characters game that you spent 7 years making if there is a Guilty Gear double X accent core plus R dollars on the store. And it has, unfortunately, this is what we are fighting against. I still personally think that 12 euros for Merfight are a bit too low, but this is only a personal opinion, and I would push it. But yeah, compared to what I've seen around, I think that an indie game, at least in player perception, an indie game between $20 and $30 could be still okay, but above, it's very difficult to place it.
Mono, sorry, go ahead, Matt, if you have something.
I was just gonna say, yeah, pricing in games is extremely difficult, especially for indie stuff, because there's tons of things about the indie apocalypse, and there's too many games, and it kind of becomes this race to the bottom where you're like, there's just so many games that to kind of make your game stick out, you sometimes just have to be cheaper than something else, and that doesn't mean your game's bad or anything. It's just like you're trying to get people to play your thing, and that's kind of why I feel like the free to play discussion even has come up, is because being free is the fastest and easiest way to get people to play something. They're like, oh, it's free. I don't have to pay anything to at least try it. So that's been I think that's a very big challenge in game pricing in general. Because I mean, if you really think about it, King of Fighters was, I think, $60 at launch. But if you think about what the season 1 and 2 passes, it's like a $90 game by the time you get every character. And that's even Street Fighter 5. They're not $60 games anymore if you buy every season from, the get-go. There's the definitive edition that is eventually that, but yeah, for indies it's very difficult to price that thing because you are against that big competition. And I know Merfight is not King of Fighters 15. I'm proud of it in its own way, but I know it's not better than that, however you define better in that realm. But that's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that's all I'm saying, is it's very hard to price things. I hate pricing things and marketing in general. Just all that kind of selling your game is very difficult for small indies.
Mono, what has your experience been with trying to price your game and sell it as an indie and compete with those larger titles?
I think it's been really interesting. So my game is $5, so it is very, very cheap, and I feel like there's kind of the idea that like you have to compete with these big titles if like, and for me personally, I like making games as a hobby. So, it's not going to be something that's very, um, I'm never going to try to compete with something that has maybe like a whole team of people working on it, Like I'm only one person. So it's interesting. I don't know how, I'm still kind of torn on how much I want to actually price my game because it's technically early access and I have been adding a lot of things and the price hasn't really changed. I know on itch you can like buy it for more. So at the start I had it recommended that you buy it for 10 instead of 5 because that's what I would like to price it as, but in reality most people just would buy it at 5. So, I think eventually I'll maybe increase the price once it's, everything's fully done. But I don't know. If in a perfect world, I would have made my game free. But I just feel like with how much time I've spent on it, it feels a little bit like I don't really want this to be free,
I mean, yeah, you should be rewarded for your for your work and your effort and your time. That's valuable, and that's like what really makes these games worthwhile. So yeah, that makes sense. I think it's you are also going with just the pay a flat price, get access to the game. This brings up the wider issue of post game support. So like post launch, you have to continue supporting continue supporting these games. That costs more, right? And so how do you balance providing that extra content with the fact that you either have to now charge them for it in order to justify that development, or say I'm eating it and I'm hoping this encourages more new players to buy in, and that's how you support it? Like, how has that balance been working out?
I think it's been interesting because in my game, on the surface, it might seem like I haven't really added that much, but I do enjoy secret unlockable things. So I feel like that's kind of how I'm supporting it afterwards, you know, where it might not
Mm.
seem apparent, but
Oh, that's interesting.
I
So
wish more games did that. I wish more games had like unlockable characters, unlockable stages, things like that, because it really adds to kind of like, like if you buy a fighting game and you buy the season pass, you have everything, you know, but so there's not really anything that seems like there's more to do or more to, you know, besides what, you have available. But like in some older games, if you unlock a character, it's like, oh, a whole new character to play with, you know? So I feel like I don't know. I wish more games would do that.
it's a really good way to kind of extend your post launch support. It's built in, but it takes a while to access. So it's like even if it's not like it's a DLC pack later on, but it's the appearance of one where you get this feeling of a content drop as a player later on.
Yeah.
Andrea, you seem excited about the idea of unlockables. Oh, got to get unmuted.
I just needed to unmute my mic. Yeah, obviously. I mean, unlockables is something that's so I enjoy single player content in fighting games, and without unlockable, I wouldn't have clocked something like 70 hours in Soul Calibur 6 or 40 hours in that Saint Seiya arena fighter that some of you might have seen me playing recently. I think they are a good part of this genre that we are unfortunately losing. Because obviously for tournament mode, one has to have everything unlocked, so there is no surprise. You cannot actually put secrets unless... I mean, I had this conundrum with Schwarzblitz because the initial roster is, if I remember correctly, 8 characters and you have to unlock the other 20 or something. And obviously, I had complaints about it because people wanted to have the full roster available from the beginning. So the way I solved it was twofold. First, when you boot the game for the first time, you are asked if you want to unlock everything from the beginning. And if you select no, you can actually go to the single player mode and unlock everything. If you select yes, you have everything unlocked. And second, there is an option. In the options, there is a tournament mode that if one toggles on all tournament legal content except costumes is unlocked. And then switching it off locks them again. And actually, this was my way to solve this issue. And I have to say the idea came from a meme Twitter account called the Good Fighting Game Ideas that was sometimes ago on Twitter. That it was actually proposed as a parody, the idea of this unlock prompt at the beginning, but it was actually a pretty cool idea. At least solved my problem. So, yeah, I would love unlockables to come back, and I know Mono has something in this direction.
Their Mono does have a couple redacted characters, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Love, for Five Force Fighters. I mean, like, so I mentioned that like you kind of got this infusion of funds from the Kickstarter to be able to kickstart your production. So looking forward, I mean, you're going to be able to obviously sell that game to a wider audience when it goes live. But how are you planning for like post launch support? Like, how does that tie into the way you monetize your games and what you're planning on doing?
Post launch support. I think I plan on putting more characters in, also expanding on the story a little bit after. I was also thinking of new modes that we could also implement into the game. I think that's going to be really exciting. And kind of just maybe catering to like the fan base that we already have, showing them, what the characters are really like, things like that. Content that more so involves the community in the characters and the overall, universe of Five Force Fighters, if you think about it. Because if you think about fan bases like for Avatar: The Last Airbender, they're just watching the TV show, but they are in love with Katara, Aang, and things like that, and that type of stuff should be in fighting games as well. So I feel like um, investing in the IP is truly like important. Like investing in those characters and the things that surround them is what's gonna keep people coming back. And I think post launch, that's where I'm putting a lot of my time and resources in, is like making sure that the people that we have with us that really already love what we have will love it even more as we continue developing the game.
And are you thinking that like the progress here is the traditional DLC drop where it's like paid DLC and that's kind of how you keep the development going, or is this more like community building DLC and like strengthening the brand?
I was thinking, I don't know if I could drop all the knowledge, but maybe I was thinking maybe like kind of both. There's these aspects that I'm thinking like, okay, some stuff are free, like things that are really truly important. I want to be free, like, or I think is like important for the community, like story and wanting to know more. That's going to be something free. Um, they'll be able to experience all the characters that we have in the DLC, but it's not necessarily in the way that them being playable. You know what I mean? Like if they're in the story mode and you're fighting them, you're interacting with them. Doesn't mean you're gonna get them outright. But that's still something like I have to think about. It's still pretty far out. But yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
Have to see how that one plays out. All right. I mean, that is something that like I will give credit to Serlin Games for the way they handled their free to play Fantasy Strike, at least in terms where it comes to the competitive elements of the game, where they make sure that everything, if you want to be a competitive player and play this game in tournaments, everything that you need to do that is available to you from the launch, right? Like you open up the game and you're able to it. You're not paywalled away from those competitive aspects. And then they want to expand and then monetize the other stuff surrounding it. And I don't know. So I think that's something that players will react to very strongly one way or the other, where it's like, no, let me only pay for DLC, or hey, I'm happy to pay for the character because that's why I'm playing the game. I'm playing the game so I can play Noelle in Blazblue, right? So I'm going to pay for Noelle. Is there, I don't know, is there any other, how do you feel that impacts the way people interact with your game? Is that a turnoff if they have to keep paying and paying down the road?
I think so. I mean, I feel like if you constantly have to pay for something, even though you bought the game, you're like, okay, this is cool. I bought this story, da 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 da. I thought I bought the complete game, but then you kind of drop something else that further extends what the game was. I know it's like, yeah, you're getting something new, but at the end of the day, it already felt incomplete with what you dropped. But if you kind of drop your game where it feels completed and then you add more to it, I guess that's more fair. And like adding more characters has that effect where if you drop a new character, the game already kind of felt complete if there was a big enough roster. But if it's not big enough, like say you drop your game with 5 characters and then there's 10 DLC characters, then you kind of feel like you paid for something that you wasn't complete, like it was partially complete.
In
I
my
mean,
opinion, it all depends. Oh, sorry, Mike.
No. You have the
In my
floor.
opinion, it all depends on when those 10 characters are released. If they are released on the span of, let's say, 2 years, I think it's reasonable. If they are released just after, let's say, day 1, you have 5 characters in your game and drop 10 characters day 1, then yes, it's a ripoff. So there is a graduality on that. And
All right.
I will just go back. Sorry, was just one thing I thought. Was there any game that made this approach where DLC characters were playable in training mode but not in any other mode, or hasn't it? Because I think I've seen some games which did it, which could actually help, but I don't remember if it's a thing.
No, I can't think of any off the top of my head. And I don't know about you folks. No, maybe not.
I can't think of one, but yeah.
Brawlhalla lets you play whoever you want in training mode, says the chat. So there have been a couple there. That's true. Brawlhalla is another large, very, very big free-to-play fighter. Oh, and Fexel as well. Fighting the EX layer, yeah. So there are a couple games out there that are giving you access to the characters to at least experience them. I think, Love, that's a really interesting way to do it. You might be able to interact with the characters even if you can't play them. That's one way to bridge that kind of the gap between people who want everything competitive and people who want like the single player onboarding experience. So I would like to actually, we were talking about this. You can't sell a game for $100, right? Like, but I think sometimes you can. I mean, I bet you folks who have done Kickstarters, Matt and Love have both done Kickstarters for their respective games. I bet you got some donations that were well above whatever you could reasonably charge for a game, right? It's not all $20 donations. So there are players and there are fans and members of the community who are willing to pay well above and beyond what the standard retail price would be. So let's move. Like, I want to talk a bit about the community. What is the importance of community champions? Maybe you could rely on your community champions to say, I'm willing to spend $80 on Merfight, and that's great, and I'm only going to sell it to 100 people, but I'll sell it to whatever, right? Or however many people. But like, the community really drives a lot of these indie games. So what is the importance of community champions? Like, how do you build that support? How do you maintain it?
A little bit. I'll give a shout out to my current community organizer, Mohas Gridlock. He has been a huge supporter of the game of Merfight since its inception, almost, because it used to be free on Itch and Game Jolt just to try. And he got very into the game. And when I made a Discord, he was always like giving feedback and trying to get others to play. And for me, his contribution's not monetary per se, but it is time-based. He puts in a lot of time in the game, and he puts in a lot of time trying to get others to play the game and how to teach others how to play the game. And that has been invaluable. That's been something that like is very hard for me to do on my own because like I'm making the game. I don't have time. Like, what the heck? I think last Friday they did just like a tier list discussion stream, and I couldn't make it because I was busy, but it was so nice to have a community that doesn't need me, that's just like we can do stuff and have tournaments and discussions without the dev there. That's really nice. So my community has been very important, and I try to do the best to support it when I can and how I can. whether that's just listening to their input or like, being at a tournament and just like, helping. Well, I don't like to help with commentary because I'm terrible at it, but like just, supporting their efforts to do the game. Like I would love, like I can't make it to Combobreaker this year, but if someone was like, hey, I'd love to do a Murphite side tournament at Combobreaker, I would love to help them out like in any way I could. So, message me on Twitter if you are interested. But like, so overall, to answer the question, community is super important. It's a fighting game. It's about the players. I remember someone on Twitter once said, like, I was talking about narrative, and they were like, the players make a more important and more interesting narrative than the game does itself. And I was like, oh, that sounds stupid. And then I thought about it. I was like, oh God, that's actually like really smart and really true. And so I think community is extremely important. And like netcode is not easy to implement. I would love if I could have made Murphite without netcode and just made it a single player fighting game. But like I did the netcode, so I need a community to actually utilize it. To like tell me like, oh gosh, I'm having pain points with your netcode and here's how you can fix it or what can help. But just like, if nobody plays the netcode, then it's just like, why did I make a multiplayer game? Why didn't I just do a single player RPG or something that like doesn't need, online access?
Yeah. My thing on community, I feel like community is everything, pretty much. If you don't have community, you have a game, but we've made games so people can enjoy what we're enjoying. So that's a big thing. I remember in my Discord we were redesigning one of the characters, and we were me and my little brother were like, okay, let's make a couple mock-ups of this character's hair and what color we want it to be. We threw that in the Discord, and we got a lot of votes on like this character's hair color, and everybody was excited for just like that small thing. It's like just having them interact with what color this character's hair is going to be excites them because they're invested. They felt like they were a part of the development in a sense. You know what I mean? So I felt like that was really cool, and we took that even further by the hair color change. Kind of has a story impact. Like, and it's gonna have a gameplay impact, and they don't even know that. I never let them know. That's just something we're gonna do. So I think community is everything. They've pushed. I was able to do a Kickstarter and have a successful Kickstarter. You can't do that without community. Everybody knows that to have a successful game, you have to have a fan base that loves what you're producing. And luckily, like a lot of us here have been blessed to talk to so many of our fans, really directly and see what we can get feedback from, see what we can improve on, see what they love. And so that's really awesome.
Amazing. Mono, I'm curious what your experience with your community has been. I know you have a couple champions who have been doing some cool stuff and trying to set up tournaments and
Yeah, so I created a Discord server for my game, and the people in there are very, very helpful with finding things like bugs or, people post really interesting combos or things, and I just really love seeing that. Like that's, you know, something I love about fighting games is that there's so many different like things that you can find in the community that maybe the developer didn't intend, and be it good or bad. Like I know some people have found combos that I didn't really know were possible, and but also some people have found really, really broken things that I actually really wanted to fix. For example, one character had throw loops that were unavoidable, and you could not get out of them. So that's helpful to have a community that's very passionate about playing the game, and it warms my heart to see people enjoy my game. Something that I've put so much time and effort and love into that other people also enjoy, and it's just I just it you know it that's kind of the point of making games. It's to share it with people and hope they enjoy it as much as you enjoyed making it.
absolutely. Andrea, do you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, first I need to also make some shout out, otherwise the Scar Service Discord server will jump on me as soon as I jump out of the stream. I have also my community champions, both Screaming Rascal, that was one of the first streamers to stream the game regularly and also helping me streaming and organizing tournaments. And the indie breakdown people who actually made the first tournament possible, and also the New Zealand Schwarzerbiss community that, okay, the first local tournament of Schwarzerbiss was in New Zealand. I don't understand how this happened, but this actually happened. But the community was extremely important, and it was incredible to see the reaction to story mode. I still get people asking me story details about some characters, and sometimes I have to make answers on the spot because this wasn't in my material. And yeah, you know who you are if you are listening to this stream. And also received a lot of fan art, and okay, also not safe for work fan art of the characters of the game. And yeah, you also know who you are if you are listening to this stream. So yeah, I agree with all those that the other have said. It's incredible to see the community find bugs, break your games, because no game survives per contact with players. No game. Everything, yeah, I have put, there are no infinites in my game. Find the infinite. Yeah, I have put an infinite prevention system. Find a way to fool the infinite prevention system. This grab shouldn't combo. This grab combos. Because you forgot a one-frame link that you, developer, cannot perform, but your players that are more dexterous than you can actually do. And I have a lot of stories like this, and this wouldn't have been possible without the community. I mean, the biggest accomplishment for me was that actually seeing Schwarzerbiss in a mystery game tournament at Frosty Fausting this year. I don't know how it actually ended up there, but this was incredible, and it was everyone doing final boss dictos, but this was another story. But yeah, without the community, this game would have been existed. So it wouldn't be like this. It would be less fun, less fast, and still a lot of problems. So the community is paramount, is fundamental. It's fundamental to build one and to listen to them. You have your design ideas, you have to keep your design ideas, but you have to be open to their feedback. Because if there is no dialogue, especially in our field, we are small, we have direct contact with our players. If there is no dialogue and everything you say is just, no, I want to do like this, it's my game, my direction, you can only go so far. Especially if there is, I think one example is, I have seen players that were vocal about bursts that actually cause a combo, a defensive burst that actually open up for a combo. And I know a vocal player and Mono, I think we have seen both this discussion. Originally, I had this issue in my game too. But after community feedback, accepting this community feedback was actually pretty good, I have to say.
I mean, it's important. Like you've mentioned that like your community are they're your champions, they're your marketing, they're your bug testers, they're your emotional support sometimes, right? I mean, this is all fantastic. It's beautiful. It really is. And it's why it's one of the things that really makes me love the fighting game community is that we have players who get so passionate about these games and will go to like the ends of the earth to support you. But is it all good? Like, are there any downsides to that like kind of fandom and the like dealing with community in the age of social media?
Oh, can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say, if we're doing shout outs, shout out Sharpie, shout out Phil, of course, shout out the mods in my Discord. Love you guys. Thank you so much for helping out. But on the note of people or like the fandom in a sense, I think for Five Force Fighters, what we've ran into, it's not really really a negative, like in aspects of a fan being negative, and it's more of like kind of a race thing. Like if they see characters and they're like, oh, your game's only having black characters, and I had that happen a couple times, and I was just like, we've only dropped 2 characters. I know it's crazy, and this is like before we showed off a lot of stuff, and it's like, but this game is diverse, and we say that in our bio and things like that, and they always think that you're trying to move some type of narrative, but at the same time, I was thinking about it one time. We consume a lot of media where it's mostly maybe one race of characters in a genre or in a TV show, but when you have a character that's just solely like a cast that's solely black, you might have like people combating that idea, and I thought that was very odd in that regard, but besides that, it's usually been like a positive thing. I know sometimes it gets overwhelming with messages or like trying to respond to people and like, you know, talking about their feedback. But most of the time, I think community is positive and it's cool to have that surround you.
Anyone
I
else
mean,
have? Sorry, go ahead.
I said I didn't mean to turn it like all sour for a
No,
second.
no. I mean, it's a real concern, right? That is the kind of reaction you get. I mean, I've seen it, and like people will like. It doesn't always have to be about race or whatever. It like people will get like virulent sometimes about like mechanical changes in your game. Right? It's just people get super hyper passionate about these things, and there's sometimes a downside to it. But I don't know. Has anyone else had any kind of like struggles in the like either not necessarily like that, but maybe like that. But like in the any struggles dealing with social media and building your community through there? Like, are there any challenges?
The only challenge I would really say that I've ever dealt with that it's just getting noticed. That's the biggest challenge. It's just there's so much out there and there's so much you're fighting for attention. But in terms of the actual like original question, I have been fortunate enough that my community has been rather well mannered and not like anything horrible if they make a change they don't like. The worst I saw, someone was like, "Oh, I don't really like the character anymore because I think you over nerfed it." It wasn't anything like, "I'm going to dox you and murder your whole family." Like, it wasn't
Yeah.
anything, insane like that, fortunately. And I think that really comes down to just the players themselves, like having the maturity to not do things like that. So the worst I've had is just the amount of feedback can sometimes get a little overwhelming and hard to, parse. You just get a lot of it. And again, going back to the importance of community, it's like I don't have the ability to do professional playtesting like bigger studios. So I am relying on my community to, in a way, to do some of that, to play games and find things that I haven't even known. I mean, last night at 4 a.m., a Japanese player was like, "Here's a infinite combo for this character." And I was like, "Ugh, now I gotta fix it." And like, that's annoying. But fortunately, yeah, I'm there is always that weird, like, when Murfight launched, I was kind of like, okay, I'm either going to get overwhelmingly negative feedback, overwhelmingly positive, or it's just going to be kind of quiet. And it's been kind of quiet. And I almost prefer that because when it's overwhelming in either direction, I mean, it's overwhelming. It's hard to deal with as a solo dev and a small indie dev to kind of deal with. But of course, you've kind of fallen to the good problems area where you're like, okay, so many people are playing the game now, I can actually hire somebody to help with these things. But it's still challenging and to get to that point and find that right thing. And then in terms of content, I think Hermit and as on Drag Her, when you have themes of that aren't, not, I don't want to say not normal, that's a horrible word. More commonplace, I'll say, whether it's your cast type, you're going to get some of that grosser feedback where people are like, "Oh, this is for gay people, how gross." And you're just like, it's not for you, and like we're not trying to really say anything, we're just trying to make a game at the end of the day. Like, it's not meant to be that serious of a thing and to create such a vile environment, but that's unfortunately just kind of how things are right now in some regards. And it's just sucks that people have to deal with that people even care about like the race or sexuality of your characters in such a vile way. But they do, and it's tough to deal with.
All right. Any other thoughts on community and social media and how you folks handle that? I mean, I got to be perfectly honest. I know that Love, that you folks are on TikTok a lot.
Oh yeah.
Right. I follow you on there, and it's wild to me to think of the epic metric, like the difference in scale between TikTok and Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah.
I think, right, like most people are on, like, the FGC is core on Twitter, I would say. But like there's a lot of potential there to reach out to new and broader audiences using TikTok and these larger platforms.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I've talked to actually Maddie about it, about getting on TikTok, because I have more followers on TikTok than I do on Twitter, and just because of the widespread of like how the algorithm works, like you're able to reach big audiences based off of what you post and how many likes you get in a certain amount of time, the view time, and all those things, and people just with that, you can have like a viral TikTok in a matter of seconds. I remember a couple of times going to bed and then waking up with, several, like thousands upon thousands of views and likes. And I'm just like, dang, maybe I should hop off Twitter, you know? But it's just like you have to figure out like how things work and what people like to see. And I think we all do this. We study everything. We not only just programming or art and things like that. We're studying social media, figuring out how to make things, pop off and get people to like want to pay attention to what we're posting. And sometimes it's just our aesthetic and it just works out, or sometimes you have to be smart about it. But I think TikTok, it makes it a little bit easier, even though I'm not a big fan of the app. But it's cool. It's cool.
Is there any? I'm curious, like Mono or Andrea or Matt. Like, have you guys been moving into other social media platforms as well? I mean, you like Matt, you talked about the importance of Discord and how that really helped with your audience, but maybe reaching out to a larger one on TikTok. Are you gonna start doing some what are they, stitches? I think that's what the kids call them.
I don't know.
Yeah, let's. It's
Do you want
a
to
bit
go first?
complicated.
No, you can go.
Yeah, Andrea.
It's a bit complicated. My main issue is that I'm one developer alone, and I'm doing most of the work on myself, and I already find it daunting to stay updated with Twitter. I think I have a frequency of 2 or 3 tweets per day, and sometimes even 10, depending on, not always around my self-promotion. And I'm already finding it hard to keep the pace. Also, and I'm not sure I could stay behind another social network. I would probably do twice the things and with twice the effort and probably with half the results, because I couldn't even be able to take care properly of it. I think, it's worthwhile, and honestly, I think that Love put a very good point. TikTok, there's a lot of untapped potential. Even if I don't use the app, I don't really like the app, but it's right. It has a completely different audience. You are going out of the bubble that is Twitter. So Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all different demographics. Actually, there was someone in an indie developer server that told me that for how crazy it sounds, they had still a lot of views of an ad on Facebook that they paid $20 some months ago, and they still get something like 70 views per day or something. I think it was ArcForged, but I'm not sure. So it's a completely different. So they are completely different demographics. In a perfect world, I should triplicate myself and have one Andrea posting on Facebook, one Andrea posting on Twitter, and one making content for TikTok, and probably one developing the games, and the fifth one working his 8 hours daily shift, because I'm not an indie developer by trade. I'm still doing this in my free time and starting with the commission work this year for other developers. But so I would need to quintuply myself to stay. So thanks, Twitter is enough. It's not the best solution, and now with all the talks of a certain person actually trying to buy it, I'm not really sure of what I will do. But at the moment, I think I will focus on one platform and do it well.
Love, did you have something there?
I thought Maddie was gonna go next.
A little. I do think my big issue with, I am looking into maybe starting TikTok stuff. I've been talking to somebody who's like, here's some strategies and ways you could approach it. But I do think social media fatigue is like a really real thing. It's just there's so many platforms now, and it's almost too many. It's like what I really wish existed was a site where I could be like, here's a video I want to post, format it and edit it for all these different social media sites in one go. I would pay like $50 a month for something that would just be like, okay, here's the Reddit post, here's the Twitter post, here's the Snapchat, here's the TikTok, here's the Instagram, here's the Facebook, like all that garbage. But doing them all separately is such a it's fatiguing, it's tiring, it's a pain. And it is just a hard thing for indies developers, I think, to do. I once had another indie developer tell me, he's like, Matt, you're really good at making games, but you're not great at marketing them and selling them. And I was like, you are 100% sure, because that marketing part is so exhausting and so difficult to do, not only to be seen, but then to maintain that when you get it. Like there's still that, like there's debates of like what's the best time to post, what's the best kind of thing to post, the thumbnails you make on YouTube, all these different rules and things, and it's just so hard to keep in mind. Like I kind of abandoned some. I don't really do Reddit anymore. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. There's too many. I use Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and maybe I'll start TikTok. But like it's just hard to keep all of them up and running. For the smaller your team is, the smaller it is to do.
Well, that's it. Yeah, you're mostly indie, like solo devs for the large part. I mean, I know, Love, you got a bit of a team, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is, you have to wear so many different hats, and it makes it really difficult to manage it all. Mono, did you have anything on community and social media? You've been a little bit quiet.
I'm not really sure. I mean, only social media I've really used is Twitter. So, and it's for the most part, I've been content with it. So it's fine. And I like, I've made a lot of friends from there and connected with a lot of different people. And I do think maybe TikTok might be an interesting place to, post about it. But again, like I definitely don't think I have you know, the capacity to deal with, Twitter and TikTok at the same time. But, that's just me.
Well, that's good. I mean, as long as you can cultivate the community that works for your game, that's really what's important. I think you've all done a really good job of cultivating, excellent communities. Matt, you said yours has been very well behaved, and yeah, it's like you draw that in. You don't always need to reach so far out that bubble and then start pulling in, influences that aren't the best all the time. So it's fascinating to me how you folks got to like manage that kind of stuff. So I think we're gonna move into our the closing area of this. Of this
Sorry,
panel.
Nor, just a small one small quip. You
By
were
all means.
telling about the fact that our community are respectful and quite good. The point is that I think all of us have enforced pretty strict rules about it. That is, in our Discord servers, we always took care that if there was anyone who started with doing troubles with problematic views, that they were curbed immediately. This was what actually allowed us to keep the community as they are. Transphobe, homophobe, racist, all out of the window. They are not welcome. They know it. It's in the rules they have to accept. And they are welcome to just get out of the server without even starting. And this helped a lot with keeping because our community are, I cannot say safe places because there is no real safe place in the internet. But it's a place at least where people have to be respectful to each other, because otherwise they cannot even take part. And on this we are, at least on my side, and I think I can talk for all other, it's a core point in our community building.
Yep. If you're gonna be like that, we'll yeet you the heck out of the door.
Yeah, I actually took Andrea's rules from their Discord into mine. I actually was like, I don't know how to do this. I just copied theirs and I was like, these are perfect, and I just used theirs.
It all lines up. Oh, that's great. Well, okay. I wanted to wrap this up. I really appreciate everyone coming out today and sharing your thoughts, talking about the state of the FGC and some of the finer points of the the inner workings of making these games. We started at the top of this talking about what was the state of the game, and frankly, I think like throughout this conversation, we've seen that it's pretty healthy. There's room for indie developers to be able to make your unique games and sell them to a dedicated audience and get that support. Fighting games in general have been doing pretty well. I mean, I don't think we're entering the dark ages or anything, but are we entering a golden age, a second golden age of fighting games? Where do we go from here? Monochrome, I want to start with you.
I'm not really sure. I think it's interesting because I'm assuming compared to a lot of other people, I'm relatively newer to the fighting game community, so I don't really have an idea of what it was like in the past in the golden age, or what it was. So I do think it's, from what I've seen, I think fighting games are becoming a little bit more, popular, a little bit more, you know, the community is growing, and it's a good thing, you know?
Absolutely. So yeah, you have some hope that we're going in the right direction. What is the like if there's one thing about the FGC that you would like to see really highlighted and valued going forward, what do you think it would be?
Oh, this is a tough one. Hmm. I think maybe like I think people should be more open-minded about the fighting games they try. There's this recently, it's not kind of a tangent, but there's this fighting game that I played called Acceleration of Suguri, and it's not something I'm really like I would have thought I would enjoy, but I really do enjoy it a lot. And it's not a traditional fighter, but it is a fighting game. And I just think if more people would, maybe not judge a game by its first look and try it out, you'd find that you actually enjoy a lot more than just what your small niche of what you enjoy.
Great. Love, what about you? Where are we heading with fighting games?
I personally think, I mean, when I was talking to my friend Phil, of course, his huge thing was like indie fighting games are pretty much the future of fighting games. I semi agree with that. I think as a community, people are leaning towards the uniqueness of indie fighting games and what we're bringing to the table. Not only when it comes to art, but when it comes to mechanics and our unique ideas of how to express ourselves through gameplay and art. Uh, I think I think personally, if we're able to cultivate a community uh, that plays our games like Evo or Combobreaker or something like that, we could really change the momentum and the tide of how people see fighting games in general. Street Fighter, Tekken, Guilty Gear, they got the crown right now. But we can always dethrone the king and the queen and the prince and the princess. You know what I mean? It's just I really want to see that change in culture where we can actually, have an Evo per se alongside Evo. That would be really cool if we're if we can make that happen. And I think that might be the future with this roundtable and then the next roundtable and the other panelists that will come through. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Beautiful. Matt, where are we standing?
So I guess there's like I have two parts to this really answer. One is I would obviously love if indie fighting games were not judged by their looks as much. I'm doing this game solo, so my game does not look beautiful. I'm trying my best, and I know there are visual improvements, but I would love if more people would not immediately go, "Oh, the game's ugly. I don't even want to try it." But I think realistically, what I really wish would change in sort of the FGC as a whole would be the scarcity mindset that I feel a lot of people approach, like the whole like people have to play my game. If they play a different game, there's less people playing my game, and then my community is going to die, and then there's going to be no opportunities for it, and I'm going to be alone and sad. And it's like, no, that whole snowball effect's not going to happen just because people are trying different games or just because a big streamer doesn't like your game. It's okay. Like there's what 7 billion plus people in the world, and like not all of them can play video games for various reasons, but there are a lot of players out there still, and it's okay if some people don't like your game and don't even like the genre. That's okay, like, because we have a lot of space for growth, and I wish we would kind of get rid of that toxic sort of like, this game's dead and play my game, this game sucks, play my game. Like that whole attitude I wish would go away. As for the future, like the free-to-play stuff already is kind of like we are touching, like how are we going to see monetization change in the future? But even just platforms, I hate VR, which is kind of ironic because I work at a pretty much a VR development studio. Not 100%, but very close. I don't hate it per se. I'm just very skeptical of it. I don't enjoy it, but I do think it has a future and place in game development. But like, are we going to see VR fighting games, and what could that even look like? What could that even be? We have mobile stuff. Like, we haven't really seen a big mobile fighter take off, but maybe as phones and technologies improve, like we might see that. I think Tough Love Arena is a really interesting case of like, here's a WebGL based fighter that like you don't even have to download. You just play it right in your browser. So I think the nice thing about the indie side of stuff is we can have that risk and we can take that time to try these new things that might just fall flat on their face. And like, yeah, it sucks. It's an ego blow. And sometimes we do put a lot of money in a thing and it doesn't go as well. But like bigger companies, again, like I've said much earlier in this discussion, they don't have the room to do that experimentation. They can try, they do little things, but if they go too far, their investors and bigger things are going to say like, oh no, we can't do that at all. Like we can't even approach it that way. So I do think I definitely think there's room for indies in the space. I think they're going to grow and I think they're going to influence bigger titles as well in a way. But I think it can't grow if we don't kind of get rid of that scarcity mindset. And one thing I love, real quick shout out, there's this community called the Fraud Crew, and some of their members really enjoy Murfight, but they play all kinds of stuff. And I love indie communities and groups that do like, or not indie, but fighting game community groups that do like Street Fighter 2, the movie tournaments, and Battle Craze, and all these other games that like I've never even heard of, or like the Sailor Moon fighting game for Super Nintendo. I was like, people play this competitively? Like it's, that stuff is cool and interesting. And I think because, you know, indies can do improvements over like older games that are out there, that we can sort of create these spaces, and that's very exciting, for sure. So I hope the future is bright. I think it is. There's definitely some uphill battles for sure, and there's some expectations that need to be managed, but I think it's overall, you know, barring other things in the world, I think that the future of indie FGC is pretty bright.
Excellent. Andrea, take us home.
So, okay, first off, shout out to the community lab, because these are the guys, some of the guys who met was also talking about they love everything that is a fighting game. I have found so many things, so many games that I didn't even know about just to hanging in their Discord. And Polar B Air and his crew, they are all amazing people for this. About indie fighting game, the future, it's actually pretty interesting, because now it's the time where those kids that in the 90s were playing arcades are becoming full-fledged adults and developers. So we might be, this is one reason why we might be seeing a lot of new ideas coming out, because all these kids that fantasized about making a fighting games when they were in the elementary school are now actually have the means to make their own fighting game. So this is, in my opinion, what we are seeing a wave of people who played fighting games, but now thanks to our Unity, Unreal, and all other engines that decreased a bit the entry level to actually make a game. And there are other engines like Ikemen, or even this Dinosaur of 2D Fighter Maker 2002 that still exists. I still don't know how, but still goes strong. And this is actually giving possibility to a lot of people to express their idea, to try something new. And this is it's a good period. What is actually, I just have one concern. The fact that the GGPO and open source and that rollback became so widespread it's both a blessing and a curse for indie developers. A blessing because now we can actually build games whose player can actually connect from every part of the world, from Australia, make a match with US with a decent connection. So it actually expands your possible target. But it's a curse because it's not so easy to implement. It's not plug and play. In order to make one's game, I speak as a developer now, in order to make one's game rollback ready, there are a lot of small steps that one has to take, and they are not easy. Not for some new developers, and sometimes not even for seasoned developers. Because if your game was not thought about with rollback in mind, you are not going to add rollback anytime soon. It's not like magic water, just just put into water and add rollback. It doesn't work like that. And the point is that this increases a lot of expectations. So new fighting games, have to have rollback to be commercial, right? This is the idea that we have now. But for some small developer or some people who are starting right now, this is not possible. So I think that until 5-6 years ago, you could get away with a commercial fighting game without any online. But now it's harder. There is a lot more competition. There is a higher bar to clear. Honestly, I will be honest. If I had to start now, I probably would have never made Schwarzerblitz because I knew that I couldn't implement that rollback network would have been a hassle. The whole netcode stuff would have been a hassle, and this would have burned my mind. I was lucky to start it in 2016, where there was already netcode was not seen so much as a priority, so I could focus on what I liked to do. But now, probably, if I started today, I wouldn't have gone into this direction because I would have been scared to have to implement online in my game to just have it above the minimum level required to be considered. And this is honestly a scary thought for me. But,
Yeah. There are risks, right? There is. It's not always, flowers and and puppies and rainbows when it comes to rollback netcode. There are actual consequences to implement and things that the changes that have to be made.
Yeah, but on a more positive note, I see that is probably my issues were not so. That is, I have seen that there is still a room for games that have not online functionalities. I'm looking at Heatwave, for example. I'm looking at my own games because I'm seeing people still playing with Parsec, etc. Okay, Parsec is another level, so it's harder for a player to jump in and get a game. But at least it's an alternative. It's not a perfect alternative, but I think it's something that at least can help first-time developers to find their position in the niche, so that you don't have to start with rollback, but you can start with something that is only local play, see how it works, and then move to your big commercial project. I'm just saying, so if there is any developer who is following us, I would just say that if it's your first game, probably if you go for netcode, it will take 2 or 3 years more than if you go without. So think if it's actually the game you want to put your money on. If it's not maybe the case to start smaller with something that you can play locally with your friends or locally around with people you know, instead of making this giant leap, because it's not hard, but it's not easy as well. That is, if one is a good programmer, you can actually build something logically in a way that it makes adding netcode to the system not that hard. So it's doable. It's not. I don't want to scare people to say it's impossible, we are doomed. No, but it's not too hard, but it's not trivial. So just keep this in mind.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. I really appreciate everyone joining us today for the very first indie fighting game developer roundtable. I genuinely hope I'm going to be able to get to do more of these. I hope you all have enjoyed the conversation and have enjoyed taking part. Let's go around and we'll do a final shout out where people can see your info and let us know what's up. And you can let us know what's up, where to find you, where people can talk to you. Andrea, where can we find you online?
I'm mostly active on Twitter, so my tag is Andrea D Projects, and I usually use my Twitter account for tweeting about my games and also every other indie fighting games that I can find around. And I'm also a writer for Super Combo, this website the Shiburizu and guys from GBL actually put out to preserve the Shoryuken forums archives. And I have a weekly column there in which every week I write about a new fighting game. I've already something like 25 or so articles in the archive. And I hope if people are interested to learn about new games or obscure games that might not have heard of in the indie scene, then I would say that this could be an interesting read for them.
Great. And Love, where can we find you?
Hey. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I have a Tumblr, don't use that. And YouTube at Kaizen Creep. But yeah, just making a fighting game, having a lot of fun doing it. I just wanted to say it was an honor being on this panel with all you guys. It was really cool. especially getting to talk to Andrea, because Andrea, I read his article when I was first starting. I was in like I think my freshman year in college. I was reading one of his articles on making a fighting game, and I hit him up at the DMs. I was talking to him about it because I was so excited at the time. I was like, "This is so cool." I'm talking to Andrea about fighting games and stuff like that. So, just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you so much for dropping information online. It was
You're
really,
welcome.
yeah, of course. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm really happy that actually someone made use of this article. This made my day, actually. So I'm thankful to you for having told me this.
Of course.
Right, Matt DeLuca. Where do we find you?
Twitter is the best place, just at Mattrified. I have a link in my profile to all my other stuff, but Twitter is probably the easiest. I've been on Twitter for a long time. And then there's also the Mattrified Games Discord, which I believe is a link in the Twitter profile to it. I actually think discord.mattrifiedgames.com should take you to the invite link. Don't know because I haven't tested it in a while. But those are probably the top two easiest places to get a hold of me about both Murfight and my other game, Battle High, which I am hoping to do an update to one day relatively soonish. But yeah, this has been great, and I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, that's all I have for now.
Great. Well, thank you. And Hermit, where are you online? What's going on with you? What are you up to right now?
So you can find me on Twitter at Monochromesoft, and I mainly just post about, maybe I post some behind the scenes stuff sometimes, post about new things that I'm going to add to the game. And yeah, and then I also have a YouTube, MonochramitHermit, where I usually post, just a gameplay video every update, just to, just for fun. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Great. And then Safety Man. We've had quiet in the background here running this stream here. We've had myself and Safety Man as well. So we're gonna give a big thank you, Safety Man. Where you at?
Oh, you wanted my social? I thought you were
Yeah.
cutting to us. Okay, fine. You can find me on Toronto Top Tiers. We're on twitch.tv/Toronto Top Tiers. We're also on Discord, and YouTube. Oh man, I'm forgetting how I did my ad roll. We run Stun City every week, or Cyber Stun City. It's a online fighting game tournament. And I stream on Twitch sometimes under my own name, but yeah.
Go watch some Star Fox speedruns.
Yeah, something like that.
And then, of course, everyone, I'm your host and moderator, Mr.MKL. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been an absolute riot. You can find me on my Twitch, of course. Hey, you're here. You already know it. You can find me on YouTube as well, at Mr.MKL_ on the Twitters. That's where I talk about my stuff. I do the Niche Fighter Monday. Every week I stream some niche fighting games and try to celebrate them and hang out with the folks in the digital basement. So I hope you will all join me for that and check out the YouTube where I post a bunch of stuff, including some game dev analysis and tournament match analysis as well. So you can go enjoy that. But for now, I think we're gonna sign off. And I just want to say much love to everyone out there in the indie fighting game community, in the niche fighting game community. I've made so many fantastic friends and connections here, and I hope that we all just get to play some more games together and celebrate the good word that is indie fighting games.
Can we do a group wave?
Yeah, 100%. Let's go to
the main panels.
Go to the chat. Everyone gets to put some faces to these names. That's one of the most exciting things here. Like I said, much love, everybody. Stay safe out there, and we will see you at the next Fighting Game Roundtable.
Did we do it?
Mike, raid someone.